I didn't expect to speak so soon, but it is my great pleasure to be here again. In 1 year time, I rejoined ECRFA and Papa to celebrate the history and heritage of the Chinese railroad workers who came to the great state of California more than one and a half centuries ago. As the Chinese Consul General in San Francisco, representing the Chinese community benefits or the interest in more than 5 states, that is Northern California and Oregon, Washington, Nevada, and Alaska. I could say that during the last 2 years, more than 2 years, since my arrival in San Francisco, I witnessed the hard works and also the tremendous contribution made by the scholars, volunteers, sponsors in the Bay Area to support the study, in-depth study of the historical contribution made by the forefathers of current Chinese community in the Bay Area. When these hardworking Chinese leaving their home in Guangdong province for this great land, and only to be recognized more than 100 years later. So today is the day that many of us, many Chinese, I hope all the Chinese community here, are celebrating or commemorating the day of inclusion. So who would imagine that 1.5 centuries later, China and the US have become the two greatest countries on earth. And as many of you could just recognize that during the past many years, maybe 45 years, since the visit by President Ronald Nixon to China, and then China and the US mutually recognized the diplomatic relationship. So 45 years have seen the great development and culmination of great achievements by these two great countries. So today, when you travel to China, actually I just returned from China from my family vacation. When I took the bullet train, I just recall, because I had that kind of experience, I just recall that 150 years ago, Chinese built the transcontinental railroads for the United States. And then in China, 1.5 centuries later in China, Chinese built our own bullet train. And it took people in Beijing to have the same day lunch or dinner across hundreds of miles during the same day. So it's amazing to see how we have achieved. So maybe when they were here many years before, they didn't realize that they could make it for themselves at home. Maybe that is what they expected. When they see what they achieved here, they would know that many years later we'll make it in China as well. So it's amazing to recall these experiences, to celebrate their successes, even though very hard. I visited Chinatown, San Francisco many times. I talked to many people many times. And also I know Chinese community in California is not limited in Chinatown. The oldest Chinatown is not San Francisco. It's somewhere in the heartland of California. I hope that I could took the July bus tour to the many places which will link us today, which will link current contemporary Chinese to the homes these Chinese community forefathers had in China, and we are very sure we can do that. I just talked to Francisco that just yesterday, one of my friends who represented a multi-county prefecture city in Chinese Fujian province wrote to me that Placer County, you have any idea? Placer County, maybe it is county executive, invited him to visit them. I thought, what is it? What is it? So I googled the map to find that Placer County is the place where you have the great Lake Tahoe, the national forest, and the great Sierra Nevada mountains. And then I came here today only to know that many of the Chinese historical relics and places are located in Placer County. So this is just magical. This is just magical. I hope the Chinese Consul General in San Francisco can do better to be helpful, to be resourceful for you guys when you try to bridge the awareness between our two peoples and countries, for which I do appreciate. So that is about the history. China today is different from China 30, 40 years ago, not mentioning 15, 20 years ago. China today, led by the Chinese Communist Party, is achieving itself goals that even Sun Yat-sen would not have imagined to achieve. And we made it. It is because of the common and heartfelt efforts made by the Chinese, hardworking Chinese, who many of them made their due contribution to the development of California and the United States. So China today is trying to develop its own infrastructure. Infrastructure development in China is very instrumental for its projection capability. We are having the Silk Road economic belt, and we are trying to develop our own 21st century maritime Silk Road, 21st century maritime Silk Road, and many of the heads of state along the Silk Road economic belt and 21st century maritime Silk Road will gather in Beijing in just more than 1 week time in Beijing. It will be a great summit talking about how economically these countries and China can work together. So it's a great event. It will be a great success, I'm sure. Infrastructure, I mentioned infrastructure. Infrastructure development between US and China may be another future point of cooperation. So many of the friends I have talked in the United States, they are very interested. They are very interested in the latest development in China. California and China are forging newer, greater relationship because California alone represents the single most important exporter of American goods to China, accounting for nearly 1/3 of U.S. export to China. It's so significant. The mayor, the vice mayor, the lieutenant governor, the governor and the lieutenant governors, and many of the constitutional officers and state lawmakers and the city mayors, city council members, they are making tremendous efforts to forge new types of relationship with China. So I hope that many of our Chinese community leaders and those who have already made tremendous contribution to U.S.-China relationship, we're still working harder to achieve even better results. So with this, I want to thank you for inviting me here. My colleague, Councillor Wang Dong, is also here. And I wish the event a great success. And also I want to appreciate City Saint-Ramon for having this very first one in the Bay Area. It will be a very significant monument to commemorate the historic contribution made by our Chinese forefathers in California. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Dai. I think that was a great speech, and it was truly meaningful to celebrate the contribution of the Chinese railroad workers 150 years later. As you know, May is the Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So this event, the timing of this event is very fitting. Before I move on any further, I just want to acknowledge that this event is sponsored by Building America, APAPA, the City of San Ramon, Chevron, California Railroad Museum, California Center. Some of these words are a little bit tiny to read, as well as individual contributors such as Yin Gao, Ren Chen Yu, Ping Wei Zhuang, Su Wen Shen. We appreciate their sponsorship for this event. To move on, we have the honor of Francisco Castillo, the Director of Public Affairs of Union Pacific Railroad. He would like to make a few remarks for this event.
Thank you. Good morning so far. It was a nice ride coming down from Sacramento, and it's kind of warm over there. And then I come here, it's kind of a little chilly, but I love it otherwise. I first want to thank the U.S.-China Railroad Friendship Association and the Asian Pacific Islander Public Affairs, the Tri-Valley chapter particularly, for bringing us all here together today. You know, for over 150 years, Union Pacific has been committed to building America and serving as an economic engine and improving the standards of life for millions across the country. And building upon this heritage, we're committed to being good neighbors and help build safe, prosperous, and vibrant communities by partnering with local nonprofits to help invest in cities and towns in which we operate and our employees live and work. Throughout its existence, the success of our business has been inextricably linked to the economic and community well-being of cities and towns across the nation. We take pride in the role we have played in helping communities thrive and believe the impact we can have on local communities is greatest when it is authentic to our history and company we are today. As such, we're proud to support the Iron Horse Regional Trail Sign Project, which, as you know, commemorates the contributions of Chinese immigrants building the first transcontinental railroad. And as many of you know, in 2015, it was the 150th anniversary of the Chinese building of the Transcontinental Railroad, and Union Pacific was proud to host many of you that are here today and others through a train route through Donner Summit, just the ones that actually are going to be doing very soon in July, to visit some of the monuments and some of the areas of historic significance to the Chinese. We were honored to do that, and in fact, on May 10th, next week, we're also going to be celebrating Union Pacific's 150th anniversary of the building of the Transcontinental Railroad, where again we'll have Congresswoman Matsui also talk about the importance of the Chinese immigrant community in building the Transcontinental Railroad, and I know Papa will be there as well to represent. So it's an honor to do that. So just as the railroad opened up avenues for sharing different cultures and experiences, we seek to ensure all citizens within our operating communities have access to special places that celebrate cultural diversity, artistic expression, our natural environment, and the social interactions that enrich our lives. So again, it's an honor to be here, and look forward to working with you guys throughout the next 2 years as we celebrate the 150th anniversary in 2019. Thank you.
Thank you, Francisco. Next up, we have the host city's mayor, Mr. Bill Clarkson. He would like to make a few remarks.
Thank you very much. It's quite an honor. In fact, I didn't realize that you were turning 150 years old in terms of the completion of the railroad. This marks San Ramon's 150th anniversary as a city, and so the two go together. One of the comments I thought about sharing with the group is that there was a large population that came from China to California in the 1850s, 1860s, many of them from the Cantonese area. Are any of you descendants from Cantonese families? A few. When I grew up in Oakland, yes, when I grew up in Oakland, there was a very strong Cantonese community. In fact, Mandarin was a foreign language to most of them and most of us. But what's interesting is how much time, as they came to California and they worked in the gold fields, and they also helped to build the railroad, was the challenge that came to the Chinese community in California in particular, with the completion of, when the gold fields were laid out, when the railroad was completed, what was to happen to all of those Chinese workers? And primarily they were men. And the fact that many of them came to the San Ramon area, to the San Ramon Valley, and they found places to work and to live here in the valley, were welcome to the valley here. As you know, there was a history of anti-Chinese pushback for the immigration. The San Ramon was one of those communities that didn't allow it to flourish at all. And the Chinese were welcomed here and worked here in San Ramon and had several businesses in the old village of San Ramon. So I'm really thrilled that we get an opportunity today to recognize the contributions the Chinese have played in our community, and more importantly, the amazing contributions that the Chinese community play in San Ramon today. With your leadership, Andy, and others, and I so welcome the fact the consul was here to share your thoughts. They're very thoughtful and talk about that. So Andy, thank you for this opportunity to share a few comments and to share through you to the rest of the group how much we appreciate your contributions as a culture over the last 167 years and the contributions you make to our city today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Clarkson. He has always been very supportive of the Asian community and fosters a relationship. Next up is a legendary character, at least to me he is. He is the founder of APAPA, the Asian and Pacific Islander American for Public Affairs. Let's hear from Mr. C.C. Lee.
Thank you, Margaret. And on behalf of PAPA and Railroad Association, I'm a founder of the Railroad Friendship Association too, although I co-chair with my great friend Margaret Wong in Sacramento. And I'm very honored to be here, by the way, as Mayor Clarkson said. I'm not one of those original Cantonese. I was here respond to the President Kennedy's call to help America build better aerospace in competition with Russia. During those times, I was born in China when Taiwan came here as a student. But I learned this history about the American house being built because I become very, very appreciative of my immigration life, and I want to give back to America. So now it's 15 years, met with our friends from the PAPA, now it's national, 21 chapters, 30,000 members, especially are the Tri-Valley chapter, and Andy and me and Margaret and Marsha and Nancy's leadership. So much work you have done, and we formed the mission of PAPA is giving back to America. As from Asian American point of view, we wanted to not just be railroad workers, which we did it, and we now just want to be engineer scientists like myself. We want to be a part of building a good government, a good community, like the railroad people did before. When they come down from the railroad, they can become farmers and build in California for waterway, or now where I live. I just come from Rio Vista, McDonald's this morning after I cooked breakfast and lunch. That's next to the river where the Chinese built all the waterway, the delta, to build California after the railroad built California agriculture. But this is a story about, not just about that. Then we 2 years ago that we decided to form this railroad or association. So the vision of PAPA is to how build a better America, so Asian Americans participation in building better community, better government. That's our next challenge and next, say, contribution we should do. And we do. The railroad vision is to build the friendships, like Francisco mentioned earlier, the partnership in America, like our Consul General Cha said earlier, the friendships, mutual benefit around the world. This case happened to be between the people Chinese in America, American, both countries. So that this is what really the foundation for the build upon what today that this railroad trail, the historical trail with the railroad history on. I'm very, very proud to be part of it. I want to thank you all for coming here to remember this. Our mission is truly again, build a better America, better friendship, better peace of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, CC. That was a great message. Next up, we'll have some plaque presentation. The first will be Deputy Cha. He will represent the General Council of China to recognize the contribution of Union Pacific Railroad. Thank you. And Francisco, don't go down. You're up. As the director of Union Pacific Railroad, they would like to recognize the city of San Ramon in this event.
This is Councilman Sachs.
Yeah, we have City Council Harry Sack here. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, you're the man. Thank you. It'll be right there with you. Thank you.
It's Bill's turn. he will be presenting as the mayor of San Ramon, recognizing the sign director, Len Liu and Susie Edwards. Len and Susie. Oh, Susie is absent today, so Len, please.
I'll give you both. We'll hold that one in front.
All right. Next, we'll have Cece, as the founder of PAPA, presenting the plaque to the board member of the Tri-Valley chapter. Cece.
Oh, and you take one.
Yeah, okay.
Actually, let me switch this up.
What do?
Actually, Actually, Andy, please stay up. We would like to welcome all board members of Tri-Valley Chapter to be coming up here at the same occasion. We're run.
I want all your eyes look at me. Thank you.
Next up, we have the president of UC RFA, Ms. Wei Zhang, presenting the keynote speaker, Phil Sexton.
Hey, Phil, come here. Phil is the director of California Railroad.
Not quite.
Okay, since we're at this slide, I would like to introduce
He's
him.
my director of Railroad.
Phil is a railway history consultant for the television show.
Consultant.
Yes. So Phil,
You see that he's so old, he knows everything. but railroad.
You're setting me up for failure.
He does.
Yeah, you change the position. Yes.
Oh, I see. You go by line.
I'm sorry.
Go by line.
last we have the VP of UC RFA.
Sponsors.
Oh,
Sponsors.
sponsors? Yes, sponsors, please come up.
You got one already. Okay.
Xu Wenshen, Ping Wei Zhuang, Ying Gao, present. Ren Chen Yu, Ryan Yu, and UCCA. We appreciate their sponsorship. All right, thank you very much. And we have the honor of the check being presented by Francisco.
Good. Oh, good. That's great.
So on behalf of Union Pacific Foundation, we wanted to present $15,000 to the Memorial Monument Project that you guys are also working on as well. So I brought it with me because I knew I was going to be here. I could see all of you and present it to you guys.
Hey, good.
Thank you very much. Deputy Chang.
Get the mayor. Get the mayor.
Mayor. And those who just received the plaque, please come forward.
Nancy, come in.
Nancy, Marsha, Ching Ling, Harry.
I already heard the story.
Okay, look at the camera.
This way, guys.
Okay. All right.
Okay, look at me. One more. Hold on there. Okay, now look at here.
All right.
1, 2, 3. Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
I was 6'3" for a second.
Well,
I do want to thank the Railroad Association, our president, Wade, please come here, and Stephen, the vice president, and board member, Monica, and, yeah, they are here from, Zomi, where are you? Zomi, come here. She's one responsible for making the movies. And those are the core members of the Railroad Association. And that Mark Wong could not be here. I want to recognize them doing all the work, put all the money out, just like everybody else as volunteers. And we share the same mission, same passion to build a better America, build a better friendship. Thank you very much. Thank you. Here's the contribution, $500 from same group and Harmony City. Boy, that sounds real good. $500. Thank you. We need all the money, we need all the volunteers, we need all the support. Thank you so much.
we appreciate their generosity and support. All right. I hope you're ready to hear some stories and learn the history. Next up, we have the pleasure brought to us by Phil Saxton from California State Railway Museum to hear some story and learn history about the Chinese railway workers during the 19th century. Now, Phil was the railway history consultant for the television show Hell on Wheels. He also helped the educators from Stanford University and UC Davis to document the history of Chinese in California during the 19th century. And he would tell mostly unknown stories of the vital Chinese contribution to the railway developed in California and at the West. Let's welcome Phil Saxton.
We're going to swap computers here very quickly. And there's a pile of plaques back here. I hope I remember to get the right one when I leave. They tell you as an interpreter always to be graceful in your movements. Sometimes that's not possible. It's over here. There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot tell you how honored I am to be here. Mr. Deputy Consul, you mentioned specifically Placer County in your remarks. I've lived there since 1985. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate what you've said about that. And I've worked on both national forests in that county, which is how I know a little bit about Donner Pass, and of course we've mentioned this privately, but I will take any of your group up there anytime you want and show you some of these things that I talked about. In fact, I live about a mile from Bloomer Cut, which was the first significant engineering challenge of the railroad, and the first place where Chinese were employed. It is still one of the great engineering achievements of building that railroad. But I was asked to come here today because just over, gosh, a period of about 8 years, I have very fortunately become the de facto person at the Railroad Museum that talks about Chinese history and works with many Chinese groups. But it is still very nerve-wracking for me to speak to a group of Chinese people about their own history. As a Caucasian, I feel very, very wrong in this role, and if I appear nervous, it's largely because of that. But it's also something that's very important to me. It's something that I love dearly, and I've met so many wonderful people in this journey. But the reason I do this is that for 13 years I lived very close to Donner Pass, and one of the things I did in my job was interpret transportation history, and so I've walked most of the railroad route that the Chinese built across the Sierra Nevada, and I know some things, and I take groups up there, and we learn about it. And I've been so lucky in this journey to be able to share information with noted scholars at Stanford and Davis, and to be interviewed for some books and to be interviewed on some films and things like that. But it is still very, very intimidating for me. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about this from my point of view. This is Donner Pass looking, the low spot here, this is Donner Pass looking from Donner Lake. So this is looking generally westward. And it's the kind of view that immigrants in the 1840s and 50s would have seen if they had come west very late in the season. It's kind of a daunting experience. As you get closer, you see that this is a very treacherous environment, and that line that you see on the left side of the screen that tilts down is actually the original route of the Transcontinental Railroad. The line that you see is actually a concrete snow shed, but that is the route that was built by such dedicated workers 150 years ago. Winters are very, very tough, and the winter that we're just leaving, according to the National Weather Service, is the most severe winter up there since 1872. I lived up there for 13 years, and of course for the past 5 years we've had very significant drought conditions. But when I first moved up there in 1996, I want to say, on Valentine's Day I had to climb a ladder out of my front door for about 11 feet to reach the surface of the earth. I had a snowblower. I had the county with road plows, I had a four-wheel drive vehicle, I had firewood, I had a telephone, I had a lot of things. It still nearly killed me. The fact that the people in the 1860s did work in these kind of conditions, living in tents or living in little shanties and working only with shovels, just daunts me. The railroad, as Francisco probably knows, has massive trouble in winter still with all of the modern technology and all of the power and all of the might of the Union Pacific. But that's nothing compared to what people did 150 years ago. This is what Donner Pass looks like from the air, and this is the cultural impact that many Chinese have made. I'm so sorry that I forgot my laser pointer today. But there is a sinuous route here, and that's called Old Highway 40. You have a laser pointer, bless you, thank you so much. This road here is Old Highway 40. This dates from 1924, and this is the paved road that goes across Donner Pass today. That was part of the first national highway. This is the railroad route right here, built in the 1850s. Also contemporary with it is this line right here that may be hard to see, but this is the 1864 Dutch Flat Donner Lake Wagon Road. And this was the wagon road that went just ahead of building the railroad that carried freight to and from the Comstock Lode, which was the big silver strike in Nevada. It helped fund the railroad and helped bring supplies up there. All of these things were built by hand. And the Dutch Flat Road in 1912 became the route of what was called the Lincoln Highway, which was the first automobile route across the United States. It's really important to me because that's how my mother, as a 3-year-old, was brought to California from Iowa. So my grandparents emigrated to that area. And by the way, for many years they lived in Walnut Creek. And in the 60s, when I used to visit this area, it was nothing like it is today. It was still a sleepy little town. But this is remarkable because the actual pass is right in here. And for at least 4,000 years, there is human evidence of Native Americans crossing this. Following that are immigrants coming west to either escape prejudice in the United States or to find gold. After that comes the Dutch Flat Route to bring silver from Nevada to the United States Treasury and enrich the United States. At the same time as that comes a telegraph route and the railroad, then the first highway, then the second highway, and today's Interstate 80 is actually just down off of here. It still is remarkably close in most places. I will argue that I think this is the most historic square half mile in California, because the entire early history of the development of modern California is encompassed around this pass. The first immigrants to reach California with covered wagons came right over this pass. Here's what it looks like from the old highway here, and here is the railroad bed itself. Here is Highway 40 coming down. Here is a piece of the Lincoln Highway right through here, and right in here is a real interesting little feature. That's actually the first, what's called a separation of grade for railroaders, but it's called an underpass by motorists. It's the first place where they built an underpass under railroad tracks so that people wouldn't get killed by trains. Literally the first one ever. This is the topography that looks basically the same as it has for thousands of years. And this is where these people worked so hard to complete what was of international interest in a great, great hurry. The Central Pacific Railroad, which became the Southern Pacific, which is now part of the Union Pacific, was dreamed up and surveyed by white men. And they were crazy to want to build a railroad. People thought it was impossible in the same way that people thought it was impossible for bumblebees to fly. But they didn't know that they couldn't do it, so they did it. The problem was that they started building this during the Civil War, and we actually have the Civil War to thank for this, because prior to the Civil War, when Congress fought about where a railroad would go, the Southern congressman would not allow a northern route, because that would give the northern free states more access to trade and to commerce. The northern congressman would not let a southern route be built because that could result in the expansion of slavery. So, oddly enough, we have the Civil War to thank for actually being able to build the Transcontinental Railroad. Who knew? Who knew? But because of this, there was a huge labor shortage, because many Californians went back east to fight the Civil War. Many other Californians were still mining, and in 1860, just before all this happened, silver was found in Nevada, just east of where Reno is today, called the Comstock Lode. And those who remember the old Bonanza TV show, Ben Cartwright's fortune was based on Comstock Lode silver. So people were flocking to the gold fields, and the railroad had huge problems as they were building up into the Sierra, because white men would sign on to work on the railroad. They would work for a few days. They would be taken to the end of track. They'd work for another few days, and then they'd say, "See ya!" And they would head off towards Nevada to make their fortune. When Leland Stanford was the president of the railroad during this time, and Stanford was governor from 1861 to 1862, and he campaigned with a very large plank of anti-Chinese prejudice. Yet it was Stanford's company, reluctantly at first, but then wholeheartedly hiring every Chinese worker they could find. First, they went to the town that I live in today, and they hired every Chinese worker they could in Auburn, and there were many there, because Chinese could work in the mines, but they could not own property. They could not file claims on their own. A lot of white miners were really frustrated with Chinese, because the white miners would mine, they would leave tailing piles behind, and the Chinese would come in and extract more gold out of the tailing piles, because honestly, the Caucasians were just too lazy to sit down and do the hard work. But they were making lots of money, and so this led to things like the Chinese Exclusion Act. It led to all these things. And so Stanford campaigned on a platform of getting rid of Chinese, yet his company ended up being the largest employer of Chinese in the United States. And it changed his opinion. Not to where he really wanted to give Chinese equal access and equal rights, but he felt much better about them. I'll get to that in a little bit. But they were forced to hire Chinese labor. And of course, we hear these stories that I think are apocryphal. How can these small people build this giant project that we're working on? And Edward Crocker is thought to have replied, well, they built the Great Wall of China. They can do this. I hope that that's true, but it just sounds like a little too good of a story to be genuinely true. But lo and behold, Chinese were hired from around California, and then contractors were sent to Guangdong province to bring Chinese workers over. And unfortunately, we don't know much about the individuals because the railroad did not hire most Chinese directly. They hired contractors who often were Chinese but sometimes were American, and they paid the contractors lump sums for 15, 20, 50 people. So we don't know the names of these people. This has been one of the great mysteries as Stanford University works on the Chinese Railroad History Project. But, and you read accounts of the day that thousands of Chinese were swarming over the mountains, and they looked like gosh, I can't think of what the term is, but they made representations in the popular press, such as Leslie's Illustrated Newspaper, that there were just thousands of people all over the place. And that's probably a little bit of hyperbole to exaggerate effect for journalistic, for ratings, basically, so that people would read things. The best information we have that I've talked with the Stanford people about is there probably no more than 3,000 at a time, and perhaps 10,000 or so worked on the entire project between 1864 and 1869. But regardless of the number, they did the work. The white guys weren't just sitting around being lazy, of course, but it was the Chinese who did the really, really terrible and hard work. And in the Railroad Museum, we represent this with a few scenes. We honestly don't do as good a job as we would like to do, and we're trying to improve that a little bit. But the Chinese handled explosives. They built the tunnels, they constructed the road beds, they laid the rails. There were Chinese workers that were honored by Leland Stanford with laying the last rail at Promontory on May 10th, 1869. This is a photograph that almost no one has ever seen before because it wasn't published, but this is one of the Hart photographs, and it shows Donner Pass looking generally east. If you're familiar with Donner Pass, Highway 40 is over here and Donner Ski Ranch is right here. And this is the roadbed under construction. This is Tunnel 7, here is China Wall, here is the roadbed, and over here is Tunnel 6, the Summit Tunnel. And it's remarkable that you see the roofs of structures here. These are both offices and barracks for the workers here. The Summit Tunnel is 1,654 feet long, and it was, at the time, it was the largest railroad tunnel in the world. It took nearly 2 years to build. This was a job site for 2 years, winter and summer. And summers up there, highs can be in the high 80s, which is brutally hot at 7,200 feet, because you don't have as much atmosphere insulating you from sunburn and atmospheric effects like that. Winters are god-awful, because this is a pass, and that means that on the east side is the Great Basin, and on the west side is the Pacific Slope, and there's always a pressure imbalance, so there's always a 20 to 50 mile an hour wind up there, and on winter nights, almost every night, there's about a 70 to 100 mile an hour wind. People lived and worked in this, and they lived in it 24 hours a day, and they didn't go home for breaks, and they didn't, like on the TV show, they didn't go into Truckee every night and gamble. One of the interesting things about that. But I'd like to focus on this part of the photo a little bit, because this is one of the few that shows some work going on here. So here's a close-up of that, and I'm sorry that it's fuzzy, but the original photo is about 2 inches wide. So we see in this photo a worker, we see a horse, we see a single axle cart, and we see this derrick that is used to put the rocks in place here on China Wall. I'll show you some close-ups of the stones here, but the stones are generally 200 to 500 pounds each. Plus there were large stones that as they built the roadbed up, they laid large pillar-type stones back into the roadbed to be buried to keep the wall stable. Also, if you notice here, this wall is not vertical, it is slanted back, and that's one of the genius things about how it's built. It is a dry-laid wall. There is no mortar. There are no mechanical things that hold it together. There's gravity and really good engineering, and it still does this remarkable job. But when you go up there, you also find evidence of human habitation. And I have found this particular pottery shard many times. Do you recognize the pattern on it? Sure, it's double happiness. I still see this in a good Chinese restaurant today. When I first found this was probably about 2005. When I find it and show it to groups, I then hide it under a rock, and so far it has managed to survive. When I picked this up, I believe that this is a rice bowl. I'm not certain of that, but it's a rice bowl. It looks a little too large for a teacup to me. But this was in the hand of a Chinese worker who had a meal, or several meals, or many meals by this. And they were so dog-tired at the end of these 12, 14-hour days, and they ate their rice, and perhaps they gambled a little bit, perhaps they talked to people. But the echoes in these shards of pottery tell the entire story of this. and they were left behind so that people such as me and people such as you can make a direct connection with these people of the past. It's so incredibly important, and it's so exciting when I take groups up there to ask them to look around and have them have the thrill of discovery of picking this up. Who knows who else has handled it? And I hope it doesn't disappear. One of the major problems is looting of these sites. That particular shard was actually found here, and I'm sorry that the photo is not terrific, but this is actually a rectangle, and this is a building site. One of the buildings that I showed in that 19th century photograph was here. And over here where this pile of rocks is, this was a part of a hearth, and there was another hearth over here. And if you go here today, and if you want me to take you up there, I charge a little bit, but I'll take you up there. There are pieces of the past, such as that shard of pottery, such as square nails, such as many things. One of the most remarkable things we found last year was this coin. I've been going up there for almost 20 years. We had not found this coin until last year. This site has been looted like crazy. It is not even considered protected by the Forest Service anymore. Yet somehow these pieces of the past remain. And I urge you, if you ever do go into a place like this and find these pieces, as exciting as it is to pick this up, please put it back. Let it tell the story to other people. It is so important. Who knows how much value this had to the person who owned it? This might have been their single reminder of home. But it carries all of the baggage of that trip from Guangdong province across the ocean, of leaving your family, of sending money back to keep your family living during a famine period. This tells the whole story. So if you ever find things like this, please honor them by leaving them there. We found this 3 times last year. The 4th time I wasn't able to find it, and I really hope someone didn't end up taking it. But it leads to the construction. So here's another view of the rail bed. This is what it looks like today. Southern Pacific detracted in 1993, and one of the great advantages that we have is that because it's detracted, it's safer than being on active railroad tracks. I never tell anybody, I never lead anybody onto any active railroad tracks. Still, when I go out here, pardon me, Francisco, I'm trespassing on your property. I try to be very, very careful about that. We do keep situationally aware, but I don't send people into deep tunnels anymore because it actually is Union Pacific property. And with my white hair, people recognize me from about 2 miles away. They all know who I am. But I like to take people out here because that wall, let me get back here for a second. Here's China Wall. And if you were standing right about here, and it was 1944, you might have seen this view. This is called a cab-forward locomotive. It is the ultimate steam locomotive. It was the last order of steam locomotives that Southern Pacific ever built. The man who took this photo is named Ken Yo. Ken is a wonderful person. Unfortunately, he's in hospice care right now, but I'd like to bring this up because this locomotive itself weighs 1 million pounds empty. It's pulling something during the war, and this route was a vital conduit to bring troops and munitions to the Pacific theater of World War II. This helped save democracy. This helped save China from the Japanese invasion. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depends on your point of view, these trains also carried portions of the atomic weapons that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This was so important as a vital war resource that Army Rangers were stationed along the tracks. At the ranger station I used to live at, there was a camp of Army Rangers, and they would patrol the tracks to guard against Japanese sabotage, because if the tunnels had been collapsed, if the route had been seriously disrupted, it might have changed the course of the war. And since my father was a pilot who fought in the Pacific, something on this route might have saved my father's life. This is incredibly, incredibly important. Today the wall looks like this. And keep in mind that when they built China Wall, they were stuck for about 2 years building Tunnel 6. It's just off to the right side of this photo. The rocks quarried to build this wall are the waste material from that tunnel. And this was built in great haste because there was no time to stop and look and admire this, and train passengers never would see this. They'd ride on top of it. But look at the beauty of this wall. Look at the intricate joinery of this. Look at the craftsmanship of this. When you come up to this wall, you're looking at the work of people 100 and now 52, 53 years ago, who built something in a great hurry with engineers and managers yelling at them, screaming. One of the things that they had was, you need to work as if heaven is before you and hell is behind you, but you need to move, and you need to move now. And they didn't say it nearly as kindly as I'm saying it. But they came up with this wall, this thing of beauty, that I used to go to at least once a week and visit. And when I look at these stones and I see the same faces that were quarried by these unknown men, working thousands of miles from their homeland, speaking only to their co-workers because they couldn't speak the language of anything around them, of men who, when they got to the Nevada desert, were told by the railroad, you better not run off or try and go anywhere else because the Indians are cannibals and they will eat you. Men who were nominally paid the same as whites but had to buy their own food. Men who, when they tried to go on strike to even out their wages, were threatened with abandonment out in the desert and out in the mountains. But they persevered, they built this thing. And when I look in particular at these rocks, knowing that the men who did this, I can touch the same things that they did. I'm just in awe. And the beauty is so amazing to this. It really is such a thing of beauty. I want to point out in particular, there's quarry marks on some of these rocks. These are done with what's called a feather and wedge process, a common way of quarrying granite. That's the same holes that they drilled, that they split that rock with. I'm touching the same face that they did. It is just indescribable how important this is to me. They got these rocks from building the tunnels. This is the famous picture that many people have seen of Tunnel 6 in mid-construction. And this photograph is really remarkable because it's taken on a day in early June, and I've forgotten which day it is, but there's one day a year when the rising sun shines right into the bore of the tunnel. And Alfred Hart knew this, and he set up this shot. I don't know if you can see it on the screen, I can see it on mine, but there's a little line right here of dots. That is thought to be a worker walking through there with a candle on his hat. They didn't stop work for these silly photos, but the exposures are 5 minutes or so, so you really don't see people moving in these things unless they want you to. But this is a remarkable thing because this was done with black powder. It was done by hand with people with hand drills, who one person held up a drill about 6 feet long and the other person had a sledgehammer. And the person holding the drill really knew that the person with the sledgehammer knew how to hit with a sledgehammer. And they would hit it and go, wham! And then they would turn the drill a quarter turn. And wham! And a quarter turn. And in a day you could drill about 2 feet, but they needed 4 to 5 feet deep holes. Then they would pour black powder into these holes. And they would seal it with wet clay, and they would stick a fuse in there, and sometimes the fuse was electric, sometimes it was a lit fuse. They would light the fuse, or they would spool the wire out, and they would run like heck, and boom! And before the dust had cleared, and without masks or any sort of OSHA requirements, get these guys back in here, muck this stuff up. Nobody ever talks about lung diseases, but I'm sure there were a lot of cases of silicosis and things that were identified as other things. But these tunnels were built 1,654 feet long, nearly 2 years. Here's what it looks like in cross-section. And the vertical line here is actually a center shaft. When they came through here, they were making 8 to 12 inches a day average progress. It's not very much. So someone decided that by going down in the center and starting from the center and building out, they could do from 8 to 12 to 16 to 24 inches a day. But still, you have to drill a 75-foot shaft. And here's what the top of the shaft looks like today. And the first steam engine ever brought to California was cannibalized. It was taken up there. It was mounted as a vertical boiler. The mounts are still there in the rock, and they used it for a steam hoist. It's the only steam-powered equipment used on building the Central Pacific. And I've known this for years. I've been to this many times, and I thought, yeah, okay, so they did that. And then one day I started to think, if I'm a Chinese worker and I'm told by the engineer, and I'm doing 6 to 12 inches a day, the first day I'm going to be shin deep. Then the second day, perhaps knee deep. Third, fourth, fifth day, and at this point, that's probably the height of a Chinese worker. And then by the second week, it's double my height. Third week, triple my height. And then they built a barn over this, so I lose daylight. Every time they fire a blast down there, they do the same drilling process, they do the same fuse, and they get into the bucket and they unravel the fuse so they can get to the top before they blow that. And then there's no ventilation fans, but they drop them right back in, they shovel that stuff out. And indeed, in this photo, all of this rock material around here is waste rock from that center shaft. How do people actually do these things? I wouldn't do this. I don't know how people did this, but they did this and more. And then at 75 feet, they brought the white engineer down there and he said, okay, boys, that way and that way. And the whole thing is about this wide. And so you have two men in there, again, starting another process. My gosh, how amazing is this whole process. Here's what the center shaft looks like from the inside. The bottom of it is about 7 feet wide. My arm's reach is just over 6 feet. Yet, through the genius of the surveying and the techniques that people used, these things all work. You can still see, if you go into these tunnels, the evidence of the blast. This is the bottom of one of the holes that were drilled and blown out with black powder. And you can still see the radial marks of the explosion here, 150 years after the fact. It's another way that I can get very close to the people who actually did this. In those intervening years, from 1867 to 1993, I don't know how many tens of thousands of trains went through there. I don't know how much coal and wood and oil smoke and diesel exhaust was put on those things, but I know that kings and presidents and commoners and fresh produce from California and weapons and crooks and young people and happy people, and I don't know who went through there. Millions and millions of people and millions and tons of everything, yet I can still see really direct evidence of the people who built this. It's a testament to the work that was done there. This is the popular view of what building the railroad was like in the 1860s. This is from Frank Leslie's Illustrated. And it shows one of the explosions that went wrong and thousands of people working and dying and stressing out. And there were very much incidents like this because there were no worker protections. One of the kind of unknown things is that for a short time at the Summit Tunnel, nitroglycerin was used. Nitroglycerin was invented right at the time when this tunnel was being built. And nitroglycerin has a much higher explosive rate per same volume than black powder does. So they, on the railroad, they realized they could drill smaller holes and still blast as much. So if you drill smaller holes, you can make more forward progress. And indeed, they doubled their rate of progress. But nitro was so dangerous it had been outlawed in California because a shipment of nitroglycerin blew up half a block in Sacramento at the Wells Fargo office, in San Francisco rather. So they brought up a Scottish chemist to make it on site, and then the general story is that people were so afraid of nitro they quit using it after this tunnel. But we've got some research that seems to indicate that Alfred Nobel found out that the railroad was illegally manufacturing nitroglycerin without paying the patent fees for it. Just a business decision. But eventually on May 10th, 1869, East and West met at Promontory, Utah. And there is a national monument out there today. But this literally changed the world forever. And it's particularly important to people of Chinese descent and everyone in Asia because one of the goals of building the railroad was to open up the trade with Asia generally. It didn't quite happen instantly because the country and actually the world went into a recession just as this railroad was completed. But by the 1880s, all of that came true, and there was a huge, huge trade in Asia because of this work. This is the allegorical version of this work. This is a painting called The Last Spike by Thomas Hill. It hangs in the Railroad Museum, and we compare it in the museum with one of the actual photographs. This is the allegory, the photograph is the reality. But I like to point this out because here's Leland Stanford, the president of the railroad. It was him who had this painting commissioned. It took about 10 years to paint. And Stanford, like many politicians, had changing alliances with people. So over that 10 years, he had some people painted out who were in the photo. He had other people painted in. And because it's allegorical, he has some people in here who were no longer alive. Somewhere over here, Theodore Judah is here. He died in 1863. But I'd like to point out right here that they are clearly in a subordinate position, but there are Chinese workers in this painting. They are laying the last rails. Here's clearly a Chinese worker. Here's another one. And they are indeed subordinate to Governor Stanford. Unfortunately, that's common at the time. But the fact that he had them painted in here, and remember that in 1860 he campaigned on hating Chinese and wanting them all gone, tells me a lot about how much his opinion changed of this. Because they are not shown in the official photographs. They are not. But they are in the painting. And this hung in the state capitol for many years as a reminder of this part of California's history. When I said that there aren't any in the official photographs, I'm sort of right, sort of wrong. These have been analyzed and are thought to be Chinese workers based on their dress. But they clearly aren't identified. They don't show them. And in the photographs that everyone sees, the Chinese workers are not mentioned. But they were given a place of honor. After the railroad was completed, many Chinese left the railroad, or they began building the railroad south through the Central Valley and eventually over to Ashby Pass in 1874, which the Valley Railroad and Tehachapi Pass in particular caused California's agriculture to just explode, because suddenly you have markets back east where you can ship oranges in winter. Imagine being in North Dakota in the winter and having a fresh navel orange. Easy today, but back then, or getting a head of lettuce in Boston. Oh my goodness. We take all this stuff for granted. Some of them came here to the San Ramon Valley, some of them came to the Bay, some of them stayed with the railroad, and even into the 1920s there were some Chinese workers that Southern Pacific either honored or they would exploit for publicity purposes if they had worked on the railroad. But they are such an important part of the history. I am so grateful to be a little tiny part of this, but it is really groups like APAPA and the UCRFA and other groups that are really making huge strides in this. Thank you on behalf of the Railroad Museum, thank you on behalf of me, and it's just an honor to build speeches, so thank you again.
Thank you, Bill. I felt as if he has took me and us, traveled back in time to be, or to take a glimpse of their life, of the Chinese railroad workers. Next up, we have Andy Lee. Andy is the president of APAPA Tri-Valley chapter, and he is also the Contra Costa County Managed Care Commissioner, San Ramon Economic Development Advisory Committee member, Leadership San Ramon Valley Program Board member, Doherty Valley San Ramon Rotary members, Bella Vista Elementary School Site Council, and San Ramon VUSD Parcel Tax Oversight Committee members. So let's welcome Andy.
Thank you, Margaret. Just switch to my PowerPoint. So good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to this special event and witness this special historical moment. My name is Andy Lee. I'm the president of APAPA Tri-Valley chapter. Today, I'm very honored and also very humbled to be here to talk about the story of this information sign. So since this information sign is more to remember the history of Chinese railroad worker, so let's talk about the history first. So I think our mayor bragged about this 150 years of San Ramon. So I always put this on the top. It's coincidentally, San Ramon was built 150 years ago. We had the first permanent house, schoolhouse built, and then the city council and mayor decided to use that as the start of San Ramon Valley. So this year we celebrate 150 years. So it's very coincidental. Next, let's go back to talk about the Chinese railroad workers. Between 1865, or maybe a little earlier, 1864 to 1869, there's more than tens of thousands of Chinese came to the United States, participate this transcontinental railroad construction. And then on May 10th, it's May again, it's May 10th, 1869, the railroad construction is completed. And then there's this completion ceremony held in Utah. It's just like Phil said. And here's one of the pictures. Although there were more than 10,000 Chinese participate in the railroad construction, more than 2,000 died because of so dangerous their work condition. But at the ceremony, there was no single Chinese presented. It's even worse. Sorry, I'm a little emotional. About 13 years later, 13 years later, Chinese Exclusion Act passed. And when it was signed to law, And the Chinese immigrant was kicked out of China and kicked out of the US. They were not allowed to enter the United States. This was signed by the president of Chester Arthur. So it's really a dark history for the Chinese immigrant. So let's come back to now. This is what triggered me. To be frank with me, I mean, before this, I don't know much about the Chinese railroad history. So what triggered me to want to make something for the history, want to remember them. This is a special event. And in May 2005, thank you, Union Pacific, thank you. Thank you, Union Pacific, and they donated a train with 10 special cars. This is not a regular car you take like an Amtrak. Those are cars were pulled out from the museum all over the country. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Francis. I was told to pull those cars from the museum to put them into Oakland. It costs more than the cost to move an airplane from East Coast to West. Is that right? Yeah, thank you. So they gave us this special train ride. I was really lucky to be one of the participants. And you see this is really gorgeous train. On the back there's a big window, and on the side there's a big window. And the ride was from Oakland to Reno. It was gorgeous. And we have 3 board members participate. This is Qinglin here, Nancy here, that's me. And so this train really impacted me a lot. After that, I thought, what I can do, or what we can do here locally to remember them. So after I came back, I'm also more my PhD. Sorry, we'll do some check research to see what I can do. Fortunately, I found Saremont City is doing the Iron Horse Trail Improvement Project. Iron Horse Trail used to be a railroad built by Southern Pacific, now the Union Pacific. And it was built in the 1879 or 1890 something. Oh, sorry, thank you, Bill. 1891, and it was used till 1978. After that, the county took it over and made the hiking or biking trail. Now it's the longest hiking trail in the Northern California. So Saremont want to make it more beautiful. They want to do some improvement. I found there's one side, the theme is railroad. The side number I remember very clearly is the China lucky number 8. So I found that. Then I see there may be possibility we can work with the city to build a site, remember the history of the Saremont Railroad, also remember the Chinese railroad worker. I was really lucky, and thank you, Bill and Harry, for all your support. We got support from the mayor and the city council. They are very, very supportive. So in August 2015, we started work on that. The first thing I did is I went to the site with the city engineering department. We checked the site. It's a very beautiful site. It's just next, it's like 30 feet away from the Saremont Golf Course. So it's very beautiful. The Iron Horse Trail, you will see it will be very beautiful. And then after I checked the site, I came back, talked with the board member, I said, this is a project we need to do. This is great to remember the Saremont history, remember the Chinese railroad history. And our board is very supportive. They unanimously approved that. So starting from late 2008, we started building, design this. We read all this history, found the history of Saremont Railroad and the history of Chinese Railroad, and we started designing. I think Lan Liu helped a lot with her husband, and also the city engineering department, Robin, especially Susie Edward. She put tremendous amount of effort and very supportive, very kind working with me. It took more than a year we finally got this design finalized. And then the city sent it to East Coast. It's not here, we have to send to East Coast to get it printed. And then it shipped back to us in the early March 2017. And then when Susie brought me in the event, you take a look, how does it look? When I saw it, I said, great, this is what we want. At that time, then Susie asked me, hey, Andy, when should we put it up? I said, wait a moment, let me check around. Then we found that May is a good time, because May, like Margaret said, is an Asian Heritage Month. Also, a lot of things happen in May. Like the railroad completed in May 1969, the Chinese Exclusion Act is signed into law in May. So this is a great time. I asked Susie, can you do this? Susie is very nice, and they said, no problem, we'll do it. Just yesterday afternoon, Susie sent me emails said, Andy is installed. It is ready for your event. So 1 layer check is great. So today, we'll be able to do the ribbon cutting there. After this event, there's some direction, we will drive there. So you first exit this community center, make a right turn to Costa, go all the way, and then about 2 miles, make a right to Pan Wiley Road. I think, I don't remember how far it's, maybe 0.4 miles. You see the Walt Disney Elementary School on your left. Go a little further, then you'll see the Air Force Trail on your left. That's on the same side of the elementary school. So you may need to walk maybe 1,500 feet to go to the side. So we'll have the celebrating ceremony there, and Assembly Member Catherine Baker will be there as well. Just in case you cannot make it, you want to see it now, I think you already see a little bit. This is the picture of this site. On the top, it talks about the history of Air Force Trail, and the railroad was built in 1981 and abandoned in 1978. Almost a century, and after that, the county took over, built as a hiking trail. The top 3 pictures is more the photo from the Ceremony Railroad. And here's the trail map of the Air Force Trail. It's just a partial map of the Air Force Trail. Air Force Trail is very long, it's like more than 20 miles. Here is a Chinese railroad picture from the Chinese railroad worker taken between the 1965 and 1969. And here's the brief introduction of their contribution. You know what, I think Bill mentioned this a little bit. Before the railroad, it took 6 months from East Coast to West Coast. Think about 6 months, like half a year. After completion of the railroad, it only takes 6 days. Save a tremendous amount of time. Because of the connection, it really helped both East Side and West Side for the economic, make it kind of more exchange possible. Also, it's helped promote the Asian business. At the end, it's more talking about in 2015, Papa did the celebration of the, not celebration, it's an event to remember the Chinese railroad worker. So you know this, we got a lot of people involved. So here, I would like to thank them. First, I would like to thank the Ceremony City, the Mayor Bill Clarkson, and City Council, including the HERSAC. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you so much. Also, I'd like to thank the Ceremony Engineering Service Department. They are very supportive, very nice, and Susie always has a smile face when working with me and gets response really quick. So now Susie and I become good friends. So thank you to them. I also like to thank Lan Liu and his husband Li Gangwu from the Hair Color Academy. They put tremendous of effort and time on this. They even hired someone to help on this design, and they pay that money from their pocket. So thank you, Lan, so much. Of course, I need to thank the Papa Charlie board. They're very supportive and help a lot. I think Margaret, Nancy, Qinglin, Masha here. Also, some of them like Qinglin, I think Margaret, Nancy, you contribute the wording of this information. Son, even Nancy, your daughter, participate in that. So thank you all so much. Of course, we all get the great support from the headquarters, right, Cici? They're very supportive. So thank you, Cici. Also, I think I also thank Francis from the Union Pacific. That's right. As kind of, I always remember. I always brag about the ride I took. People are really, and say sorry they couldn't make it. I hope we can have another one in 2019, right, Francis? Right, thank you. Also, I thank the U.S. China Railroad Friendship Association, and then they are the co-hosts for this event. So thank you, everyone.
And I also want to really thank East Bay Parks and Beverly Lane, who actually the property of this is managed by East Bay Parks and through the county. And so Beverly Lane, who's on board of directors, is actually here, and I think we should also recognize and appreciate their help too.
Thank you so much, Carrie. Thank you, East Bay Parks. Thank you, Bill, for remembering that.
Thank you, Andy. That was a very emotional and heartfelt introduction, or the background information about this sign. We really appreciate everybody's efforts in making this a reality. Next, we will have a special film. Showing, and we have the exclusive first look at the film. And I want to comment that for those people who would like to keep the film, we'll be selling that after the showing, and you can find them at the table on your left-hand side. Next up, we have Ming Zhou, independent journalist and screenwriter and producer, to show us this particular film. Ming is a journalist of World Journal, and she is also the visiting scholar at the Graduate School of Journalism at Berkeley. She is a writer for Top News magazine in China. She is researching the Chinese American immigrant history, and therefore she produced a documentary film about Stan Lai crossing the Donner Summit. She's a co-producer and the scriptwriter of documentary film, including The Chinese in Silicon Valley. She also won the Gold Award for Arts and Cultural Documentary Film from the 50th Houston International Film Festival. Let's welcome Ms. Ming Zhou.
Well, thank all of you for giving me such an opportunity to show my film. This is an unforgettable trip, Francisco. This is my second time to meet you. But this is an unforgettable train ride that happened on 2015, right? So that's a train from Reno to, from Oakland to Reno. That was so unforgettable. So I have the same feeling as Annie. So actually, after the train ride, I have been to the Donner Summit for like 14 times last year to finish this film. So it's short, but the story is long. Thank you all for your time. Enjoy it.
calm and hot day in the summer of 1859, a railroad attorney met with a young engineer, Grenville Dodge, at Council Bluffs, Iowa. He raised many questions about a possible railroad to the west. Almost 1 year later, Abraham Lincoln was elected the 16th President of the United States. While facing the split up between the South and the North, he dreamed to unite the West with the East. On July 1, 1862, President Lincoln signed the Pacific Railroad Act into law and ended decades of debate and disagreement on the matter. In the winter of 1864, what California was short of wasn't gold, but laborers. The Central Pacific Company faced a severe labor shortage. Chinese workers were suggested, but it was doubted because they were so small, could they do such hard work? The Chinese built the Great Wall, didn't they? Charles Crocker's words ended people's questions.
The Chinese were small and very weak and not skilled, but contrary to that, to find out actually Chinese are small, but they are very skilled, work as a team. and they seem to have very good technical skill too in working the mountains, the tunnels, the dirt, the road, and they don't get sick like Western people will get real sick because the food, the harsh condition. And from there they start to hire a large number of Chinese from Canton.
Mass hiring Chinese began in March 1865. By May of that year, more than 12,000 Chinese workers came to the High Sierra to build the railroad through the Rocky Barrier. Many of them were recruited from Guangdong province in China. 1866 marked the peak of employment of Chinese workers.
They had about 10,000 Chinese come over in a matter of a year, and they worked on this railroad, but not without a lot of penalty. They lost a lot of lives doing this because this was all mountains. So they had to string themselves down in baskets and ropes, and then they would put dynamite in the side of the mountain. Then they would have to crawl back up before the dynamite went off. Well, obviously sometimes that didn't happen. They had avalanches. They would be housed on the side of the tracks because that's how rails do it. We live and pitch tents and live on the side of the tracks. Well, when we had bad snows, we would have avalanches, and the avalanches took a lot of lives too as well. So this is a very dangerous job and an impossible job, but as you can see, it got done.
My name is Gene O, initial Chan, and O stands for Aoyang. That one came from my father's name, Quan Aoyang Chan. So I got the Chan. But it's on my mother's side that came from the railroad. My mother is William King, and his father, my grandfather, is Tai King. And then great-grandfather is Jim King. So all the time that when I was growing up, my mother was trying to write up the history of our family, the family tree. She always said that Grandpa came from the railroad, but he was only 16 when he came. He came in 1865, and he worked with the miners before the railroad. Yeah, but that's where he got his name, from the miners.
By the time the Central Pacific Railroad was hiring mass Chinese laborers to work on the railroad, Jim King had been living in the San Francisco Bay Area for more than 10 years. He was one of the few Chinese workers who could speak English, so he was hired to recruit Chinese laborers from China. He was often called upon to interpret whenever there was business to be conducted between whites and Chinese. There were 15 tunnels lined up along the line of the Central Pacific Railroad crossing the western range of the Sierra Nevada mountains. 7 of them are crowded together within 2 miles of Donner Summit. 90% of the workers were Chinese. They worked around the clock, both day and night. Central Pacific Railroad Company's payroll records show that most of the Chinese workers were paid $1 a day on average.
They were treated very badly, under a very difficult situation, and yet they worked so hard to help America to build the first transcontinental railroad. And the most difficult part of the road is the west portion, because high mountains are cold and there's no access, no road, no nothing.
The Summit Tunnel, Tunnel 6, was the longest one built at an elevation of 7,200 feet, cutting almost through 1,600 feet of solid granite. In the early morning of May 10, 1869, 8 Chinese workers were picked up to lay the last rail. Photographer A.J. Russell took a stereo photo of these Chinese laying the last rail. None of them turned around or looked cheerful. Nobody knows why Russell erased his title of the photo, Chinese at Laying the Last Rail. east of Donner Summit used to be the gateway to the High Sierra.
Truckee occupied a unique place in the history of the West because it was a depot for the construction of the Transcontinental Railway, and it was an important supply terminal and residence for the laborers that built the railroad. According to researchers from the Truckee-Donner Historical Society, following the completion of the railroad through Truckee in 1869, approximately 1,000 Chinese workers and their family decided to make Truckee their home. Here's another picture that I obtained to put in the pamphlet of the old Chinatown, taken again from above the hill overlooking it. You can see the neatly structured rooftops. And here's the bridge, and there's the river behind it.
When he finished being from the railroad, he went building the levee here in the Delta. He was foreman, building the levee for wheelbarrowing.
By then, Jim King was about 33 years old. Like many other Chinese laborers, he was a bachelor until one day he met a girl crying in the street of Chinatown in San Francisco. Her name was Hel Shi. She had just turned 16. Her parents in China had sold her to a person who brought her to Gold Mountain for prostitution. Jim King bought her from her owner with his savings. They came back to Cortland. When President Chester A. Arthur signed the Chinese Exclusion Act into law on May 6, 1882, Chinese immigration was suspended into the United States. It is one of the most significant restrictions aimed at Chinese immigrants. Whereas, in the opinion of the government of the United States, the coming of Chinese laborers to this country endangers the good order of certain localities within the territory thereof. Therefore, be it enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, that from and after the expiration of 90 days next after the passage of this act, and until the expiration of 10 years next after the passage of this act, the coming of Chinese laborers to the United States be, and the same is hereby suspended, and during such suspension it shall not be lawful for any Chinese laborer to come, or having so come after the expiration of said 90 days, to remain within the United States.
He wrote instructions for his children to go to China to get married and come back. How to answer, how you have to say the village where they live, what street, by the school and all that. And so he wrote it in Chinese. I thought maybe I could find something there, so I had somebody interpret it a little bit for me. It's all written in Chinese.
During the 2 decades when Jim King and his family survived by farming in the Delta, Truckee's Chinatown had been razed due to anti-Chinese sentiment. The local Caucasian community was inflamed by frequent editorials published by the local newspaper, the Truckee Republican.
Quote, either the whites will rule and the Chinese must leave, or the Chinese must rule and the whites will leave. There were mobs that appeared in the streets bearing torches and shouting, the Chinese must go. McGlashan declared there will be no compromise, no flag of truce, no cessation of hostilities until final surrender is made. And he vowed that as of Friday, January 15th of 1886, Truckee would face a, quote, bitter, relentless warfare unto the death. Those who continued, the white people who continued to patronize the Chinese, he threatened, quote, are known and will be dealt with accordingly.
After his wife left for for China, Jim King was reported missing near Isleton, where he'd been farming. Since major anti-Chinese violence was occurring nearby in Antioch and throughout the Delta, was he murdered by Caucasians? Or did he somehow fall in the river slough and drown? No one knows. Son number 3 searched all over the valley and rivers with no success. Jean King was born in Locke in 1935. Historically, Locke is the first and only town claimed by Chinese pioneers from the deserted land, a shelter for all the Chinese migrating from different places with different backgrounds. Chan's father and uncles managed a grocery store in Locke, where he worked throughout his childhood. Uncle Bill joined the Air Force in China in 1939.
Yeah, he went for 8 years in China when he helped China fight against the Japanese. He went to the Chinese Air Force Academy. Well, we happened to be in the 4th Fighter Group, but then he got pulled into the 14th Air Force, still wearing Chinese uniform, flying with Chinese insignia, still, P-40 with the Flying Tiger. So he had to go to India to learn how to fly the Flying Tiger, and became a very highly decorated pilot.
Jean retired after serving 34 years as a chief rocket engineer with a Sacramento missile propulsion manufacturer. His family has a 6th generation now.
And it's really, you think back about 150 years ago, the Chinese workers that came and built the Central Pacific and built through these Sierra tunnels we're looking today, were really starting to build America. It was the Transcontinental Railroad connected America back then. Without that workforce, thousands of workforce that gave huge sacrifices, it may have never come together.
was a very touching documentary. We are running a little bit short on time. Lastly, we will have the designer of the plaque, Lan Liu, to give a few remarks about this, her design.
Hi everyone, I'm Lan Liu. So Andy asked me to talk about this board sign. Actually, he knows very well. We work together, and I don't know. But anyway, so I'm Lan Liu. I am a member of Art Advisory Committee in the City of Saramon. I'm a layer artist. I'm also the director and the founder of the art school in Fremont. It's called Pale Color Academy Art School. So our school have a team of 12 Bay Area really active artists. So we got it with one for chance. I have to say it's an amazing chance to work with Papa to create this beautiful board sign together. So, as a Chinese American, so I think it's really important for us to remember the contribution from our the Chinese immigrants. Yeah, and also, as a Chinese American, I think, especially I'm an artist, I think from my, experience, I think I really want to contribute my artistic skills and creativities to help building our beautiful community and also adding beautiful colors to our city. So hopefully that's it. Yeah, I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you again, everybody, for coming to the Saramon Community Center today and join us and go through this experience and learn and hear stories about the Chinese railway workers. As mentioned earlier, if you want a copy of the DVD, they are available over there, as well as some books about the life of the Chinese railway workers. Now we're running a little bit short on time. Catherine Baker, the Assembly member of District 16, is waiting for us at the sign. And so the direction will be available on the table over there. Feel free to take a copy, and we'll see everybody over there. Thank you very much.
Hey, Beverly.
Well, in this Park District, runs the trail. Mr. Sexton asked about some history of that, so we came to the museum for that. So that's why. But I'm always interested to see it. Oh, that's